The October sun slid low over Boston, glinting off the polished black hood of the Mercedes as it threaded through city traffic toward South Station. In the passenger seat, Sarah Montgomery sat motionless, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the footrests of her wheelchair gleaming under the light that spilled through the window. She had perfected stillness over the last 3 years, not because she enjoyed it, but because motion had been stolen from her the day a birthday turned into a catastrophe. Her father, Alastair Montgomery, occupied the back seat with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the clipped, commanding cadence of a man used to being obeyed. "No, Richardson. We announce the merger next week. The market rewards decisive leadership, not delays," he said, barely glancing out the window as they passed pedestrians hurrying along the sidewalks. Sarah stared instead at the world outside, the travelers with rolling suitcases, the students with oversized backpacks, the parents tugging children along in their wake. People with destinations they had chosen for themselves. She envied them for that. Choice, in her world, had become something other people exercised on her behalf. The car slowed, turning into the wide drop-off lane of South Station. Above them, the glass canopy caught the light like a crown. Her father continued his call without pause, voice smooth and unyielding. Sarah knew the tone well. It was the same one he used in boardrooms, in interviews, and in the rare moments he addressed her in public. The accident, 3 years ago to the day, had not only shattered her spine, it had splintered what little remained of their relationship. Before, there had been tension, but also the occasional flicker of warmth. After, there was only formality. She had become, in his world, an obstacle to be managed rather than a daughter to be loved. The shift had been gradual at first, and then abrupt. She could name the exact moment it had solidified. 18 months after the crash, she'd wheeled into a board meeting without realizing it was in progress. The room had gone silent. Every set of eyes had slid toward her, then toward Alastair. She'd caught something in his expression, a faint tightening around the mouth, a flicker of calculation, that told her she was no longer his child in their eyes, but a complication. "Schedule Singapore for the first week of next month," he told the person on the line now. "And make sure the venue has proper accessibility features." His tone made the words sound less like concern and more like a shipping requirement. Marcus, the driver, stepped out to unload the luggage. Alastair finally removed his earpiece, sliding it into his pocket with a practiced gesture, and turned toward Sarah with a smile so rehearsed it might as well have been printed on a business card. "The bus is the most discreet option," he said, as if she had been part of the decision. "Flying would only attract attention we don't need right now." She didn't respond. She knew the place he was sending her, the specialized residential program in Albany, had been chosen without her input. A court order, based on a psychologist's report, had given him the authority to direct her living arrangements. Officially, it was for her well-being. Unofficially, it was exile dressed as therapy. "You'll have a monthly allowance," he continued, checking his platinum watch. $2,000, managed by Dr. Williams. Larger expenses require approval. He slipped a debit card into her hand as if presenting a corporate gift to a client. "Pins your birth month and year. Don't lose it." Sarah stared at the card. He had given her the means to spend money, but not the means to change her life. That was his specialty, funding appearances while restricting freedom. Inside the terminal, the contrast was immediate. Gone was the sleek leather and tinted glass of the Mercedes. Here, fluorescent lights glared off worn linoleum, and the air carried the smell of coffee, diesel fumes, and humanity in motion. Families clustered around piles of luggage. Students leaned against walls, scrolling through phones. Elderly travelers clutched paper tickets with both hands. Alastair steered her toward the ticket counter. "My daughter will need wheelchair assistance to board," he told the agent, his tone all brisk efficiency. "Her arrival in Albany has been coordinated with the facility's transport service." The word facility landed like a stone in Sarah's chest. She kept her face impassive, though her mind bristled at the idea of her future reduced to schedules and protocols someone else had drawn up. He handed her a manila folder. Inside were the documents that mapped her next chapter without her consent, Intake procedures, residential rules, the court order itself. And the bus ticket. One way. At exactly 3 o'clock, he glanced at his watch. Boarding starts in 15 minutes, he said. Patricia here will assist you. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a staff badge nodded reassuringly. Alistair's phone buzzed again. Peterson, tell me the numbers are ready, he said into it, already walking away. No goodbye. No second look. Just another handoff, like passing a file to a subordinate. Sarah watched him disappear into the terminal crowd. Around her, the air hummed with voices and announcements. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. She lowered her gaze to the ticket in her hand. Albany. One way. Her name printed neatly in block letters above a departure time that suddenly felt like a countdown clock. Patricia, the gate supervisor, moved with practiced efficiency, checking the contents of the folder Alistair had left behind. Everything looks in order, she said warmly, glancing up at Sarah. We'll get you boarded early so you can settle in comfortably before departure. Comfortably. The word felt absurd. There was nothing comfortable about being escorted onto a bus that would carry her toward a life she hadn't agreed to. The terminal echoed with the sound of rolling suitcases and the monotone voice of the overhead announcer. Attention passengers. Boarding for Hartford, Providence, and New York City is now commencing. All around her, people moved toward gates with purpose. They were going where they wanted to go. Sarah envied them with an ache she felt in her teeth. Patricia led her toward the designated gate, weaving through the crowd. The October light spilled through high windows, casting long shadows across the scuffed floor. Sarah's wheelchair wheels clicked softly over the uneven tile. The closer they drew to the platform, the heavier her chest felt. She thought again of the facility in Albany, its cheerful brochures and clinical language, the structured environment it promised. She imagined sterile hallways that smelled faintly of antiseptic, days segmented into therapy blocks and meal times, staff trained to smile with professional distance. It wasn't a place for living. It was a place for waiting. She still hadn't decided if she would fight it. Truthfully, she hadn't believed she could. At the gate, Patricia double-checked her list and nodded. We'll start pre-boarding in 10 minutes. The driver will use the lift to get you on board first, so there's no rush. Sarah's gaze drifted past Patricia's shoulder to the bus idling just outside, exhaust curling upward in pale spirals. It was a newer model, silver with dark-tinted windows. She wondered how long it would take before the Albany skyline appeared in its reflection. But at 3:12 p.m., the speakers overhead crackled. Attention passengers. The 3:15 p.m. express service to Albany has been canceled due to a mechanical issue. The next available departure will be tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Please visit the customer service desk for rebooking and overnight accommodation arrangements. The announcement rippled through the crowd like an electric current. Groans. Muttered curses. The flurry of phones being pulled from pockets. A young man in a suit swore under his breath, already dialing a number. Sarah sat perfectly still, absorbing the words. Tomorrow. Not today. The bus that was supposed to take her away from Boston, and from any say in her own life, wouldn't be leaving. Relief surged through her so abruptly she almost laughed. For the first time in months, something had interrupted the rigid machinery of her father's plans. She had been granted a pause, however temporary. Patricia returned, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, honey. These things happen. We'll make sure you're taken care of until tomorrow. The company's offering hotel vouchers to anyone affected. If you want, I can help you get rebooked and set up for the night. Sarah nodded. Yes, please. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. They made their way to the customer service desk, where a growing line of displaced passengers snaked across the floor. Business travelers argued about lost meetings. Students worried about missed dorm check-ins. A mother tried to soothe a toddler wailing in protest at the delay. Sarah waited quietly, clutching the folder in her lap. 24 hours. On paper, that was nothing. But in her mind, it was an opening, a sliver of time to think, to imagine something different. When it was her turn, Patricia handled the rebooking in minutes. "You'll be on the first bus tomorrow morning," she said, sliding a fresh ticket into the folder. "I'll arrange for the shuttle to take you to the hotel. Accessible room, of course." By 4:15 p.m., Sarah found herself in the terminal's main waiting area, a printed voucher and keycard envelope in hand. She didn't open her phone, though it had been buzzing nonstop since the announcement. Calls from Rebecca, likely messages from her father or Dr. Williams. She left it silent in her bag. For the first time in 3 years, she was deliberately unreachable. Her eyes wandered toward the far end of the waiting area, where a man was speaking quietly into his phone while keeping an eye on a small girl sitting cross-legged on the floor with a coloring book. The child's dark curls bounced as she leaned forward to add more detail to her drawing. Sarah didn't realize she was watching until the girl looked up and met her gaze. Instead of glancing away, the child lifted one hand in a small, open wave before returning to her picture. The man, tall, with a worn but solid look of someone who had seen his share of long days, ended his call and approached the service counter. The little girl sprang up and skipped toward him. "Daddy, that lady over there is in a special chair. Is she sick or just different?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the space. Several nearby passengers turned to look. The man glanced toward Sarah, not with embarrassment, but with something like apology. He crouched beside his daughter, speaking in a tone meant for her, but not meant to hide. "Some people use wheelchairs to get around, just like some people wear glasses to help them see better. It's just another way of moving through the world." The girl nodded. "Okay, can I finish my flowers now?" Sarah felt the corners of her mouth lift, not in mockery, but in genuine appreciation. There had been no awkwardness, no rush to shush the child, just a straightforward answer, and an easy return to the business of being 8 years old. It struck her suddenly how rare it was for someone to treat her presence as neither an inspiration nor an inconvenience. She didn't know yet that this small exchange would lead to a conversation that could change everything. For now, she let the moment settle around her like the October light filtering through the station windows, unexpected and warm. Tomorrow was still coming, but tonight was hers. The hotel shuttle arrived just after 5, its engine rumbling against the curb. Patricia personally ensured Sarah's wheelchair was secured on the lift before the other passengers boarded. The air outside carried that particular Boston mix of exhaust and sea salt, sharp enough to sting the nose. As the lift lowered her into place inside the van, Sarah noticed the man and his daughter from the terminal climbing in after her. The girl, still clutching her coloring book, smiled again, as if recognizing an acquaintance from a previous stop on a shared journey. "You staying at the Hampton too?" she asked without hesitation, her words tumbling out in the eager tone of a child who assumed everyone wanted to talk. "I think so," Sarah replied. "Maybe we'll see you at breakfast. They have pancakes, at least that's what the picture says." The man, her father, Sarah assumed, gave a soft chuckle and settled into the seat beside her. He had an open, unhurried way of moving, the kind of ease that comes from practice rather than luck. "I'm Liam," he said. "This is my daughter, Maya. We're detoured, thanks to the bus company's mechanical issue." "Same here," Sarah said. "Albany bus." "Denver for us," Liam replied. "Visiting her grandmother." The shuttle pulled away from a curb, jolting over a pothole. Sarah's phone buzzed again inside her bag, insistent. She left it alone. The conversation at hand felt far more real than anything waiting on that screen. At the hotel, the desk clerk assigned Sarah an accessible room 2 floors above the Pattersons. As she waited for the elevator, Liam glanced over. "We were thinking about grabbing dinner downstairs around 6:30. If you're interested, you're welcome to join us. Maya could use someone new to tell her art stories to, and I wouldn't mind a bit of adult conversation after today's chaos." Sarah hesitated. It had been a long time since she'd accepted an invitation without weighing how it might be perceived, without wondering if she'd have to justify her presence. "Still, I'd like that," she said. "Good. We'll meet you there." At 6:25, Sarah wheeled into the restaurant to find Maya already in a bright dress decorated with tiny crowns, a stack of coloring pages spread in front of her like precious documents. "I ordered chicken strips," Maya announced as Sarah joined them, "because they're safe. But Daddy says I should try green beans too, because they help you grow strong. I think they look like tiny trees." "That's a good reason to try them," Sarah said. "Trying new things is how you discover what you like." As they ate, the conversation meandered in ways Sarah hadn't experienced in years. Maya asked questions about art that were both innocent and startlingly perceptive. "So, if you study paintings from hundreds of years ago," she asked between bites, "were the people still alive when you saw them?" Sarah smiled. "No, but their paintings are still here. It's like they left us little messages, telling us what they thought was beautiful or important." "That's cool," Maya said, already scribbling something on a blank page. "Then you can leave pictures for people in the future too." Liam listened without rushing to interject, occasionally steering the conversation so Maya could keep up without Sarah having to simplify too much. There was no pity in his expression, only genuine interest. Midway through dessert, Maya produced a folder of her own work. Houses with bright gardens, portraits of herself and her father, a cheerful dragon flying over a castle. "This one's my favorite," she said, holding up a drawing of two people holding hands in front of a house. "It's me and Daddy. See, the flowers make it happy." Sarah studied the picture. "You can tell you care about each other. That's the best part." Maya beamed. "Exactly." Then, without missing a beat, she began a fresh page. "I'm making one of you next." Sarah blinked. "Of me?" "Yep. But not like now, how you should be. You'll see." While Maya worked, Liam leaned back in his chair. "So what's in Albany?" "A residential facility," Sarah said evenly, "for people with spinal cord injuries. Long-term care. Court-ordered." His brows knit together slightly. Court-ordered. "My father petitioned for it after a psychologist said I needed more structure than independent living. He thinks it's what's best for me. And what do you think? I think he finds my disability inconvenient. This solves that problem while looking responsible." Liam didn't respond right away. He simply nodded, as though filing the information without judgment. "Do you want to go?" "No," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "But I don't see many options." "Sometimes the first step isn't seeing all the options," he said. "It's deciding what you want, and then figuring out one move that heads in that direction." Sarah considered that, rolling the words around in her mind. One move. She'd been so conditioned to think in terms of what was allowed that the idea of acting on what she wanted felt almost foreign. "Done," Maya announced, sliding the paper across the table. Sarah looked down to see herself, still in a wheelchair, but surrounded by children holding paintbrushes, with bright paintings propped on easels. "This is Teacher Sarah," Maya explained proudly. "She teaches about colors and old pictures and gets to pick which ones to show." Something in Sarah's chest tightened, not painfully, but like a lock being tested after years of disuse. In the drawing, she wasn't a patient or a problem to be managed. She was someone who gave knowledge, someone who mattered. "Thank you," Sarah said softly. "That's exactly how I want to be seen." "Good," Maya said, already turning back to her coloring. "Because that's who you are." The hotel elevator doors closed with a muted sigh, carrying Sarah to her room on the 4th floor. The hallway smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and lemon polish, the hum of the vending machine filling the quiet. Inside her room, the accessible layout was exactly as the brochures promised: wider spaces, lowered fixtures, rails in all the right places. Functional, impersonal. She placed Maya's drawing on the desk beside the bed. The simple lines and bold colors seemed to radiate something the rest of the room lacked: warmth, purpose, the suggestion of a life beyond routines dictated by other people. For a long time, she didn't move. She just looked at it. It had been years since anyone had pictured her future in terms of what she could give instead of what she needed. Every plan drawn up for her since the accident had been about care, managing her, accommodating her, controlling her risks. Not one of those plans had asked who she still was or what she might still want. Her phone sat silent in her bag. She knew what waited there: missed calls from her father, from Rebecca, from Dr. Williams' office. Messages written in professional tones, but pulsing with impatience. Demands for updates. Pressure to confirm she'd be on the 8:30 a.m. bus. She didn't touch it. At 7:30, she wheeled back down to the restaurant, drawn by the quiet promise of company she wasn't required to impress or appease. Liam greeted her with a nod. Maya waved as if they'd been friends for years. Dinner was easy, no probing questions about her injury, no cautious sympathy. Instead, they talked about art, travel, and the strange things people overheard in bus stations. When dessert came, Liam leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, if you wanted to do something other than Albany, do you have any resources? Anyone who could help you figure out alternatives?" She hesitated. "Not really. Most of my contacts now are his contacts, which means they're not mine at all. I know some disability rights attorneys," he said. "Housing advocates. People who understand how court orders like yours can be challenged. I could write down some names." It was a careful offer, with no pressure attached. He left space for her to say no. She didn't. "I'd appreciate that." Back in her room later, she spread the evening's acquisitions across the bed. The folded paper with Liam's list of contacts, the manila folder with the Albany paperwork, and Maya's drawing. The contrast was stark. The folder represented the life that had been built for her without her consent. Daily schedules, therapy protocols, meal plans, rules about visitors. A life defined by limits and permissions. The drawing represented something entirely different. A version of herself she'd nearly forgotten existed. Not a burden, but a guide. Not someone being supervised, but someone leading others into a world she loved. Her mind drifted back to something Maya had said so casually it felt like an afterthought. "Because that's who you are." It was startling, the authority in that small voice. As though the child had no doubt about Sarah's identity, even when Sarah herself had been drowning in uncertainty. She imagined the Albany facility in vivid detail. White walls, staff in scrubs, polite smiles that never reached their eyes. The slow erosion of her while under the weight of realistic expectations. A future spent waiting for someone else to decide when she could go outside, what she could buy, who she could see. Then she imagined a classroom. Easels lined up in a sunlit space, the smell of paint and paper, voices buzzing with curiosity. A life where her wheelchair wasn't the first thing people noticed about her. The difference between those visions wasn't just location, it was ownership. One life would be hers. The other would belong to an institution. At 9:30, she picked up the Albany ticket from a folder and turned it over in her hands. The paper was light, but it felt heavy enough to anchor her in place if she let it. Her father would expect her to board the bus in the morning. Dr. Williams would expect it. The court system would expect it. But what if she didn't? It was the first time she'd let herself fully consider the possibility, not as a fantasy, but as a decision. The idea made her pulse quicken, part fear, part exhilaration. She thought about what Liam had said at dinner, one step at a time. She didn't have to solve the rest of her life tonight. She only had to decide what she wanted to do when she woke up tomorrow. Sometime after 10, the decision crystallized. She would not board the bus. She would call Dr. Williams' office herself to say she wasn't coming. She would reach out to the advocates on Liam's list. She would fight the court order that had put her under her father's control. She didn't know what the legal battle would look like, how much it would cost, or whether she would win. But for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't measuring her future by what she was allowed to do. She was measuring it by what she wanted. She placed the Albany ticket back into the folder, then tucked the folder into the bottom of her suitcase. On top, she left the drawing. Tomorrow morning, she decided she would start from that image, not from the court order, not from her father's plan. Teacher Sarah, the version of herself who knew things worth sharing, who made choices about her own life, who belonged to herself. As she turned out the light, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar but unmistakable: ownership. And for the first time in years, she fell asleep not as cargo on someone else's itinerary, but as the author of her own next chapter. The next morning, the smell of coffee and maple syrup drifted from the hotel's small breakfast area, mixing with the sound of clinking cutlery and the low murmur of travelers starting their day. Sarah wheeled in at 7 sharp, feeling the unfamiliar steadiness that had settled in overnight. She'd woken with her mind clear. She knew what she was going to say, and more importantly, what she wasn't going to do. Maya was already at a table with a plate piled high with pancakes. Liam sat across from her, reading something on his phone while keeping one ear tuned to his daughter's chatter. When Maya spotted Sarah, she waved so energetically that her fork nearly slid off her plate. "Are you ready for your bus?" Maya asked as Sarah joined them. Sarah took a sip of coffee before answering, letting the words roll out deliberately. "Actually, I've decided not to go to Albany." Maya's eyes widened, not in shock, but in interest, as though she'd been waiting for this twist. "Really? What are you going to do instead?" "I'm going to stay in Boston," Sarah said. "I'm going to get help from lawyers who understand disability rights, and I'm going to build the kind of life I choose instead of the one other people choose for me." Maya nodded, completely satisfied. "That's a good plan. Teachers should always get to pick where they want to teach." Liam set his phone down, his expression thoughtful. "That's a big decision, Sarah. Are you ready for what comes next? The legal process, your father, the facility, they're not going to be thrilled." "I'm not ready at all," Sarah admitted, smiling despite herself. "But I'm tired of waiting until I'm ready before I take action. If I keep waiting for perfect timing, I'll never start." "That's fair," Liam said. "And the truth is, starting doesn't mean you have all the answers. It just means you've decided this isn't the ending you're going to accept." Sarah's phone buzzed on the table. 37 missed calls since yesterday. A long string of messages from her father, from Rebecca, from Dr. Williams' office. She flipped it over, so the screen faced down. Not her problem, not today. After breakfast, they lingered in the lobby, waiting for the shuttle that would take Liam and Maya back to the terminal. Sarah wasn't going. For once, the thought didn't make her feel like she was failing an obligation. It made her feel like she was claiming her right. Maya fished in her backpack and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. "I'm going to send you more drawings," she declared, scribbling her name in large block letters. "You can tell me if I'm getting better." "I'd love that," Sarah said. "And I'll tell you about my adventures in Boston. Real ones, not just in pictures." Maya grinned. "Deal." Liam reached into his jacket pocket and handed Sarah a folded piece of paper. Inside was a neat list of names, phone numbers, and email addresses, attorneys, advocacy groups, housing specialists. "These are the people I mentioned. Some will give you free consultations. Some can connect you to others. Start here." Sarah looked up. "Thank you for all of this. Not just the list. The conversation, the invitation to dinner, the reminder that I still get to choose." "Sometimes," Liam said, "all you need is someone to say out loud that you have a choice. But the hard part, the actual choosing, that's always on you." The shuttle arrived at 8:30. Maya hugged her without hesitation, her small arms fierce and certain. "Don't forget, you're teacher Sarah. That's who you are." "I won't forget," Sarah said, feeling an unexpected tightness in her throat. She watched them climb into the van, Maya's face pressed to the window in one last wave before they pulled away. For a moment, she felt the temptation to follow, to let herself be swept into someone else's journey. But she stayed. Outside, Boston's morning was bright and brisk. People hurried past with coffee cups, scarves fluttering in the wind, the city's rhythm alive around her. She had no apartment, no job, no step-by-step plan. But she had a starting point, a list of contacts, a decision made, and the knowledge that her next move would be hers alone. Sarah wheeled back toward the elevators. The drawing of teacher Sarah tucked carefully in her bag. The day stretched ahead, uncertain, open, entirely hers. It wasn't the story her father had written for her. It was better.